What's up, B1KER Bar? I'm Robert, and this is the B1KER Bar Podcast live stream, episode 100. Holy cow. I don't even know how that happened. Well, apparently, me sitting in my garage 100 times talking to people online. But nonetheless, yeah, this is exciting. It's an exciting show. We're going to have the head engineer, main guy from Cascade Components on tonight, which will be a really fun conversation. But before we do that, let's go ahead and do the normal particulars. Do me a favor. If you have Instagram, go to my Instagram and hit the little follow button. That would be rad, because I like to see more people on Instagram. And that just makes me feel better about myself, you know? So I'm trying to guilt you into this. If you're one of those people that doesn't do Instagram, at B1KERB1, by the way, and you do Facebook because you're like old, then go ahead and swing by. There's a Facebook page as well, at B1KERB1. I don't know who uses Twitter, but for some reason, I have a Twitter, and there's like 10 people over there following me. So that would be great if you just went to Instagram or Facebook instead. So with that being said, also, I have noticed lately that there's a bunch of people that are meeting, like I meet in public, and they always come up and they're like, oh man, I love the podcast. And I think some people don't know that I have a regular YouTube channel as well, a more POV kind of review style channel. So if you ever want to go check that out, just look up B1KER, B1KER on YouTube, and go over there and give it a follow. Or if you're a biker fan and you're just swinging by the B1KER Bar tonight for the first time, hit the subscribe button. It's not that hard. If you're into the show, hit a thumbs up. If you want to ask some questions and you're on the YouTube, go ahead, do that. Hit it up in the comments, and I'll get back at you. If you're listening on the podcast app, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. Write a review, only if it's going to be like 5 stars, though. If it's not going to be 5 stars, don't waste your time. It's not really worth it. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and bring Jimmy back online here. And here we go. Bam. What's up, Jimmy?
Hello. How's it going?
How's it going, man?
Yeah, pretty good.
Did you get out on the bike today?
No bike today. Just running around doing, errands and
yeah.
Sort of
I know how those days go. Somehow I ended up riding like 80 miles this week. So I don't know what I did, but apparently I blew off everything else I was doing and just kept riding bike. So let's go ahead and get started. How did what made you decide to start this company that you're running?
It started out as just a side project, like many things, I guess. It originated I was riding a little local spot, broke through a triangle on my Nomad because I went too fast in a berm, and then jumped out of it into a tree. So I was just like walking out, with my broken bike, thinking about suspension stuff and just like modifying shock, stroke, and whatnot, and then ended up going down this rabbit hole of doing math later and realized that end of stroke had some characteristics I didn't really like, and made a link to fix it, and then kind of just took off from there. There were enough people that were like, oh, hey, I'd love to, try this out, where we decided to, because there's an arm of the company that does like mechanical engineering design and whatnot. And we're like, oh, we'll just, so we have a shop. So we're like, yeah, we'll just, we'll do a batch of these parts and, put them up and see how it goes. And took off.
So what was Cascade Components is like, what was their mainstay before this? Because I never heard of you guys until the link came up. So
we do a couple of other things. So there's the mechanical engineering, like contracted design part of the company. And then dive scooters. That's actually how everything started, was dive scooters, which, for those who aren't familiar with them, they pretty much look like torpedoes, and divers hold on to them for, self-propulsion.
Okay.
While on longer dives or just for fun.
So are you an mechanical engineer yourself?
Yep.
Where'd you go to school?
University of Washington.
Oh, right on. So you've been up in the PNW all along then, huh?
Yep. This is where I'm from.
So how long you been riding?
I have been riding. I don't know when I learned to ride a mountain bike. Learned to bike a long time ago.
Yeah.
I first started really mountain biking, I guess you could say, when I was 12. So I've been mountain biking for 18 years then.
Oh wow, right on. So you've been at it for a minute, huh? So originally you were riding a Nomad, and so you just started thinking about like you weren't happy with the way that the suspension felt, or like you just couldn't get it dialed in right, or I mean, Nomad's pretty plush bike.
It wasn't so much that I wasn't happy with it. I just felt like messing around with it. I guess there are trails around here where you get up to the top and you wish you had a downhill bike. So I was kind of still am on this quest for how can you pedal a downhill bike.
Yeah.
to the top of trails so that I can rip downhill bike laps where you can't shuttle or don't have lifts.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it wasn't that I was necessarily displeased with the bike. I just wanted to mess around with it, and the results were pretty sweet.
So then instantly you're kind of like, okay, well, I met a couple of people of your friends that were like interested, or you were like, they were riding the same kind of bike, or instantly you were like, we can machine this for a couple other bikes, or how did it start growing from there?
So the first time really where it was like, oh, this, like, to actually become a real product was there's a bike shop called Downhill Zone over in Issaquah that I frequent. And I was there talking to him, and he was like, yeah, like this is, something that like I could see a lot of people wanting to, mess around with if they had the option, and you should consider, just doing a batch of them. And he was like, I'd be interested in picking one up for sure. And so, yeah, I kind of sat on it for a little bit and rode the Link more, and, talked to some more people here and there. And yeah, then we're just like, yes, we have a little bit of downtime on the machines. Might as well just, we started out with, it was like 50 links. Might as well just make 50 Nomad links and see if they sell.
And how did that play out? They went pretty quick, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, they went quick for then compared to now. Like, I mean, obviously the company's a lot bigger. The Cascade side has grown a lot. So yeah, I mean, slow sales compared to now, but for, just making, one link and no one knowing about it at all, they went pretty quick.
So it was pretty much like right through that shop is kind of how it started out, or like instantly did you guys put it up online and just kind of word of mouth spread, or?
Yeah, we put it up online, word of mouth. I don't really know exactly how it started to spread entirely. Yeah, it just kind of started going. I know people have been talking about it on forums here and there, that sort of thing. But yeah, no, we sometimes wonder, like, we'll see, one day we'll get like, a surprisingly large number of orders for one link in particular. And we try and figure out, like, why are a bunch of people buying, this link or this link on any given day? Like, it seems like it should be related.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's always really odd. Like sometimes I notice that even with like my channel, it'll be like 3 different people like ask the same question on like 3 different videos that are like not related at all. And you're like, how does that? It's like the world is just weird that way sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So when you were like originally thinking about this, like, I'm not super techie, so on like all the geometry stuff, was it just like, oh, well, I think if I move this by a couple millimeters and it's gonna like, what is it doing? Like, how is it working?
So yeah, I guess, so we don't use like the linkage design software that a lot of people do, which that stems from me just kind of liking to do math, oddly enough. So I made a bunch of equations essentially for first it was the VPP layout, and now I have stuff for everything. yeah, so just like through doing those equations, you get a really good sense of like how each dimension changes each aspect,
Mm-hmm.
of the kinematics pretty specifically.
So you're just kind of looking at like curves and which way they
Yeah,
go and how
looking at
fast they
curves.
ramp up.
Yeah, and just I mean, some links, you're doing fractions of a millimeter. Some you're doing, like I think the biggest difference is there's one where we move a pivot like 10 millimeters. It's a
Oh,
pretty
wow.
wide range. Santa Cruz links, for example, small differences on those.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, just a bunch of iteration. Looking at the curves, getting the curves to look exactly how I think I want them to look, and then making a prototype and actually writing the prototype and making sure
Mm-hmm.
it actually rides the way that it's expected to ride.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, like, so you can basically just do it mathematically, and just by looking at that, you're understanding like, oh, this is going to change the ride this much.
Yeah. I mean, so mathematically, yeah, I can tell a lot just by messing around with the curves. But I mean, there's always that unknown, until you put it on the trail.
Mm-hmm. So did you start out just with like the Santa Cruz line, just because like that's what you had, and did you just go to other Santa Cruz bikes initially, or did you then right away like, okay, well, I got the Santa Cruz one, I'm gonna try an Ibis next or something like that? Like, what was the kind of like the progression that you went about that way?
So yeah, it started out with Santa Cruz stuff and stuck with Santa Cruz stuff for a bit. And part of that was just, having done it before, you can essentially do it again with
Right.
a different Santa Cruz, model. You can change the kinematics however, well, in the certain way that, we've chose to do it, which is more progression with, some added travel depending on the bike.
Uh-huh.
And the other big thing actually is the machining side of it. Going, from say like a Nomad link to a Mega Tower link, you already have a lot of the legwork done with the machining.
Mm-hmm.
The whole like machining strategy
Mm-hmm.
essentially, doesn't have to change. So
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty easy to like get the prototype link out and get a production ready program done and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
As opposed to going into other brands, you're kind of starting from scratch. So when Cascade was really small, that actually helped a lot. Having like links to do,
Uh-huh.
and then once things started to take off was when we branched out.
So you're just like hitting up your buddies. You're like, hey, you got a 5010? You can mind if I try this? And like, they test it out, or?
That was how it started. Yeah, it was pretty much just like finding bikes that I knew someone who had the bike or could get a good deal on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds super fun. So I was telling you before we started that I put the link on last night. I saw somebody in the comments saying that they'd be afraid to like mess with their suspension, that they're going to mess something up. And honestly, it was like a super easy install. I have it on the Tallboy V4, and we were pretty drunk when we did it, and we still didn't mess anything up. So it was one of those late nights like, man, we just drank a bunch of beer, and for some reason I'm going to take my bike apart now and put this thing on. And we put it on, and everything was like super easy. I mean, obviously it's like you guys have the bearings and everything already in it, so it's not even like you have to like press bearings or anything. And then I took it out and rode it today, and like I was telling you, like definitely right off the first drop that I took, it definitely felt like it was more suspension there than that was there before. Like I felt the way that it ramped up instead of like being a little bit more jarring, because this is a 120 travel bike, you know what I mean? And I'm a pretty big guy. I'm like 250 right now. So it's not like I'm working the suspension, you know what I mean? And it definitely felt like right away I was like, man, that maybe that's in my head, you know? And the next that I hit, it was like, no, that's definitely, it feels like more squishy, you know? And And I remember distinctively as well, like on the chatter, it really felt like that high speed chatter that my wheel just felt more planted. And I was really impressed. I honestly was, I didn't know what to expect before I went out and wrote it. I mean, I've seen a few people talk about the link online, and but I basically what I had heard is like, hey, it makes you feel like you have more suspension. You know, what's the what is it that like if somebody's asking you, like, what's the link do? What would you, how would you explain it? Like the short, easy version, you know?
Short, easy version. All right, so I guess short, easy version. The way I look at it, it's essentially like so if there's a certain spring rate that you need to get the bottom out resistance that you want that happens to be higher than what gives, say about 30% sag. So it's riding high with the spring rate that gets you the bottom out resistance. So it's kind of chattery. Doesn't really track as well and whatnot. Throwing the link on it makes that like stiffer setup feel really supple off the top, and then as it ramps up, it gives you the support of that stiffer spring towards the bottom of travel.
What do you think the reason is that the manufacturers aren't making their link like similar to what yours is already? Like, why is there this need?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's one that there could be a lot of answers for. I mean, they're designing bikes for some demographic that, I don't know necessarily what it is, or where in the world it is, what kind of trails that demographic is on, geographically speaking. It's hard to say. I would assume that, there's something there has to be something they've optimized it for, right?
Right. And I always think, and it's funny you said geographically too, because like the Bronson, for example, my understanding was that was made so like the guy that worked at Santa Cruz like lives up in Downeyville, and he wanted a bike that would just like rip those trails really well, so. And I think the same thing is like you go down to like Arizona where Pivot's big, and it's like they're building those bikes for those kind of trails, and everybody's ripping that same bike, and so I guess I didn't even really think about it more like geographically, but it's interesting that, that there's something like that. Have you heard anything about like response from the bike companies themselves in like as far as your product goes? Like, is it they're stoked or not stoked, or who knows?
All over the board.
Yeah, totally depends.
Yeah. There are some that are cool with it. There are some that are definitely not cool with it.
Is there anything like people should be worried about, like their warranty or anything like that, or?
I mean, that's up to the manufacturer of the frame. The way we see it, we do our due diligence, to make sure that everything works as intended and isn't, going to cause any issues. But we can't make a warranty decision.
Yeah, no, I totally understand.
So that's, whenever people ask that, it's like we wish we could be the one to give you the answer. But at the end of the day, like there's some companies where it's like it's pretty cut and clear, and then there are others where it's not. And we don't want to tell someone, like, oh yeah, we talked, like there are these handful of people that have heard, their warranty is still valid, and then they call up and their warranty isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how it would like really play into the warranty. I guess if somebody broke their frame, and then they would just be like, is that then the manufacturer saying, oh, well, it's this aftermarket link putting stress on the frame in a different spot or something like that? Or,
I mean, there's a lot of hand waving going on,
right.
There with that stance. And I get that they haven't tested it and whatnot. But like if you look at like the world of like automotive stuff,
Yeah.
where there's aftermarket things left and right, you can go throw some crazy, aftermarket control arm kit on your truck and go rip it around, and your warranty's fine, unless that part specifically causes something to fail. And in that case, even, I mean, with the automotive world, the burden of proof supposedly falls on the manufacturer that's denying the warranty.
Right.
But that's
I mean, I have all kinds of aftermarket stuff on my truck. It's like they didn't come back to me and be like, "Oh, your engine's all screwed up because of this throttle body you put on."
Yeah, they're not going to come to you with that.
Right.
But like, if your throttle body that you put on happens to fly apart,
right,
and, trash something else, then I mean,
right,
you're gonna be like, yeah, you put a part on that broke. That's not our responsibility. So sorry.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. It's one of those things where I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I think at the end of the day, some companies, it's probably them just trying to be control of their product or something like that.
That makes sense too. Like, I mean, no one would want to see a flood of warranty claims because of some part out there that they don't understand or haven't tested. But we get a lot of emails from our customers. I can't say we've had really like any crazy reports like that, where like one of our links that we thought was fine turns out to not be fine.
Yeah. So, I personally, like, I don't really see how it would affect it that much, but I'm no engineer, so I'm sure somebody has some kind of reasoning behind it or not. But at the end of the day, for me, it was a matter of making my bike feel better, and it's done that. So I think for the cost too, what's the retail on? Are they all the same, the links?
Varies. It's based off of machine time and the amount of material required mostly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, some of them are more, some of them are less.
Yeah. So it's like, what's the spread? Like $300, $400, $500 or?
Low side, the least expensive link I think is 206. And the most expensive is, I want to say, 380.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah. So basically, you're looking at about $200 to $400, basically, regard of which bike you have. And then at this point, I mean, when I went on the website, you have a lot of different bikes. Not every bike out there, but there's definitely a lot of bikes on there. What is it? Are you just continuing to try, like, test new bikes, or like, is there a decision? Like, how is it that you go about deciding which bike you're going to try next? Is it just like, oh, that one's selling good, let's check it out? Or is there something that you look at and you're like, oh, well, I can see that suspension design is going to play well with my ideas?
Yeah. So we definitely we stick to things where we know we can do what we want. We're not trying to make parts that are, just like, so that you can have an anodized, piece of aluminum on your bike.
Right.
So yeah, it's things where we know we can make a link that makes a difference. We try and pick bikes where we see some sort of, demand for it. We're not going to make the link for a bike that doesn't need it, or for a bike that no one rides. Because I guess part of the whole cost thing is being able to distribute the development cost across enough links where that isn't, an insurmountable number. A custom link would be very, very expensive. So if we did a link for a bike where we'd only ever sell one, then,
right,
be prepared for a really expensive link.
How long does it take to make, like in that design process?
It varies bike to bike. We've got the Santa Cruz ones down pretty quick. If I had to put a number on it, though, it's hard to say. Like, the total number of hours might end up being anywhere from.
Are you guys working on it for like a month, or does it take like 6 months, or?
It's like probably about like 2 months, I would
2
say
months.
is the average right now. But it's not necessarily like two months worth of consecutive, days, right? Because like testing's one of the things that like that usually takes up a decent amount of time, just because you can't go ride your bike every single work day necessarily. So testing might end up taking double the amount of time. So like you only spend 2 months worth of time, designing and machining and whatnot, and getting everything production ready. But then it, might take 3 months to actually get the link out, or maybe 4.
I saw. Go ahead.
Or like the brake calipers. Those things have been, like 3/4 of a year. I want to say.
What made you decide to do that? I thought that was interesting. I saw those that you guys had down that Sea Otter, which was pretty rad. That you're, for the people that don't know, and please correct me if I say something wrong, but essentially you re-engineered the code caliper so that it was your own, and now it's so it works with the code brake lever, but it's supposed to be, I think they said 25% stronger. Is that what it is?
20% stronger.
20%. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that was just another one where I don't know. I'm always trying to tweak things, and I've tried a whole bunch of brakes out there. I know people love to hate on SRAM and their products, but to be perfectly honest, they're really easy to bleed. Once they're bled correctly, they're generally pretty reliable. So, after trying all these other brakes, where I had some okay experiences, some really scary experiences, I kind of ended up back on codes. I'd ridden SRAM stuff for a while before trying out all these other brakes, and ended up back on codes, but then still going, I actually want my brakes to be more powerful, but I want them to pretty much be codes that are more powerful. So it turned into, well, I'll just make a code caliper that's more powerful, and there you go.
So what makes a brake more powerful? Is it just like the
I guess by more powerful, what we're saying is for a given amount of like finger force, the brake will generate 20% more actual like force at the rotor. So because like the amount of traction you have is always the amount of traction you have. You just don't have to squeeze as hard to for a certain amount of braking. And that's just based off of piston size.
So that's what it is. Okay, that's what I was thinking it was. Yeah. So it's the bigger the piston, and the more contact space that it can push onto the rotor, basically. Yeah, I'm a Shimano guy, and I think it's just because I'll be honest. Like I had some, I think there were codes at the time, SRAMs, and I didn't really have a problem with the braking power so much. It was just more like, it seemed like the SRAM system for a guy my size, like they would heat up and glaze the pads like really quick, and then they just get noisy. And I'd always be like sanding the pads or buying new pads, and like I don't seem to have the same problem with the Shimano stuff. And I just like the bite of the Shimano a little bit better. I don't know, like.
Yeah, the feel's always going to be what the feel is. We have those like little brake cams that make the codes guide, and it's the code RSC and the guide RSC, the ones that use the swing link. It makes them bite a little bit quicker and not have as much lever throw. But I mean, it's still still feels like a SRAM brake.
Yeah. And I can understand like why people enjoy what they enjoy. You know what I mean? Like for me, I feel like, I don't know, they seem to be better. I think Shimano has a better way of like dissipating their heat. I don't know what it is, if it's just, their pads, I feel like their rotors, the Ice Techs, like definitely do a really good job of that, but I don't know.
Yeah, pad compound is a little bit of it. Thicker rotors deal with heat better too, but I think the Shimano ones are the same or roughly the same thickness. The Ice Tech is interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do like a real test as far as like heat dissipation with that rotor goes. But I mean, like conceptually, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's definitely it's one of those things that, you know, like I think people like to joke around about more on the trail and then actually like think about why, you know what I mean? But like the SRAM definitely has like way more of a softer pull, and to me,
Yes.
I guess probably because I've used Shimano for a longer period of my life, I was used to that like bite point being like off and on. And to me, like people are like, oh, there's no modulation. I'm like, well, your brain is the modulator, dude. So like, you know, like you get to decide how much you pull the brake or you don't, you know, and I guess it's just the way that some people ride compared to others. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that the reason that the SRAM feel works for me is that like the way I have my levers set up, I don't run them very close to the bar or anything like that. So it's not like I'm running into issues where my fingers are pulled too far in. And then, once you're used to that feel, which I would say I am used to that feel, then it's not weird, you know, like you were saying, your fingers are the modulation. I don't feel like I'm squeezing to a different point in the stroke and the lever stroke to get the modulation. It's just I squeeze them as hard as I need to squeeze them for a certain amount of braking. And
and in some cases I'm squeezing them as hard as I can possibly do it, and then I get to the bottom of the hill, I'm like, why the hell are my hands hurting so bad? Oh, that's it. So I saw that you guys did like a Mullet link for the high tower. What does that do? Like, how are you changing the ability to have a different wheel size by just the link?
I mean, all the Mullet links do, all any Mullet link really does is it pushes the axle, you know, like down in its axle path so that the rear end sits a little bit higher to accommodate the smaller wheel. So that's all that one does. It happens, you know, as a byproduct of getting the wheel into that position and trying to keep the progression similar. It adds that one. Oh, I forget the number off the top of my head. It's like 10 millimeters of travel that it adds. And it's just trying to correct geometry so that, you know, if you just throw the little wheel on, then all of a sudden your bike's super slacked out and super low.
How does it add suspension? Like, I mean, you're not changing your shock. Like, how does it actually add more suspension in that case? Like, I'm not I don't understand that.
So I think the more like physical way I would put it, or like a hands-on way, would be by tweaking the leverage curve, you're making it so that for a certain amount that the lower link rotates, the wheel moves more. Is kind of what it's doing. So like if your wheel moves, or let's say your link rotates 10 degrees, with the less progressive link, that 10-degree movement might correlate to, I don't know, let's say an even 10 millimeters of travel, versus when you make it more I guess you with like the Mullet link, you're increasing the leverage ratio. So when the leverage ratio is increased for that, you know, 10-degree rotation, it might move at 15 millimeters.
Interesting. So it's not like the shock's not moving any more or less. It's actually just how much movement of the tire it is then.
Yeah. So the mathematical explanation is wheel travel is actually the integral of leverage ratio. So if you integrate the leverage ratio function, that gives you total wheel travel. So that like if you visualize the area underneath the like leverage curve, that's actually how much travel the bike has. So if you look at the Mullet link leverage curve, at all times it's higher than the other leverage curves. So that means it has more travel.
That's interesting. Do you think you're going to do one for the tall boy?
Tall boy, we have a tall boy one.
Oh, I didn't know you did.
Mullet link.
Yeah. I feel like it would be really fun.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If we did one for the tall boy, it would be an upper link, most likely. just for clearance reasons.
Uh-huh.
The thing with Mullet links is so they're super fun if you have the wheel around
Uh-huh.
and can just mix and match parts and whatnot. If you don't have a smaller wheel, as soon as you start looking into the cost of getting a smaller wheel, it's a pretty expensive experiment.
Yeah. Just to see if you like it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if you got to put a $300 link on to correct geometry. I mean, you don't have to correct geometry, but let's say you're going to.
Right.
$300 link, and then I don't know how much a rear wheel costs these days, to be perfectly honest. What rims are like 100 and hubs are 250, and it ends up being, I don't know, let's say $500 for a wheel.
Yeah, probably get something built. Yeah, decent, half decent, and that's if you're not going carbon, right?
Yeah, for a half decent aluminum wheel, then so next thing you know, you're looking at at least $800 just to try a Mullet setup.
So I think for people like, there's people out there, like me, for example, that have multiple bikes. So like the idea of like, hey, I really like the way this bike rides, and I think it'd be more playful in that manner. Like it'd be easy for me because I have a Bronson, so that's like, oh, I could just take that wheel off and throw it on and give it a shot. And like, I don't know, I am like, I don't know what wheel size do you ride? Is 29er, 27.5?
All of them.
All of them, yeah.
The Enduro setup is a Mullet.
Yeah.
I have obviously the Nomad's 27.5, 27.5, Spire's 29, Hightower's 29.
Yeah.
All over.
Yeah, I have that. I like riding my tall boy, the 20, as a 29er, and I just definitely like, I'm not one of those people that's in the 29er camp that I really enjoy that 27.5 bike more. Like when I get on it, it's just more fun to like throw it around, and like the way that it whips through stuff. And I just feel like way more at home on that 27.5 wheel size. And it's like I bought the tall boy because I want it to be different, but then I'm like, I slowly want to change it not to be different. So who knows, right?
It's funny how that stuff works out.
How are you enjoying the Mullet setup on your bike?
I mean, so for what I do with it, I love it. I mean, like you were saying, the smaller wheels are a little bit easier to whip around. And especially with me not being the largest individual, and there being a lot of tight trails around here, it's kind of nice. It's a middle ground between the two. It is a middle ground on everything though. So like it definitely doesn't roll as fast on like lower angle chunky stuff. But on the flip side, I do find it easier to whip through tight corners at speed, stuff like that.
Yeah, I still feel like 29ers, like I've ridden a handful of them at this point, and like I just feel like they're definitely way better than they were when they first came out. But you can definitely, I don't know, I just feel like the bike picks a little bit more of the line than it does on a 27.5. That's the best way I can say it. Like I feel like sometimes I come into like some chunky stuff and it's like, well, that's the way I'm going. I'm just monster trucking over this, where like with the 27.5, it's just like a little more twitchy. So it's like you can really like, especially on like the real chunky stuff, I don't really notice it much whenever it's, just normal trail riding kind of stuff. But like when something's like really chunky, I just feel like I don't have as much control of where the bike goes. I don't know. Does that sound logical to you, or I don't know?
Yeah, it does. I think part of that might be the geometry for the 29 bike versus the 27.5. Because like one thing I try and wrap my head around still is like, is this a difference in wheel size that's making these bikes feel different, or is it actually that this like smaller wheel bike, like let's say the 5010, that'd be the 27.5 counterpart to the tall boy.
Right.
I think that bike is intended to be more flickable and kind of easier to jump all over. So part of me thinks some of it's wheel size, part of me thinks some of it's geometry. It's probably a combination of the two.
Probably, right. My lady has a 5010, and I've always wanted to ride it, and for some reason I never do. You just reminded me of that. I was like, man, that's right. I mean, I have one right here in the garage. Why have I never ridden that bike?
They're really fun. Yeah. I mean, if I was going to pick a kind of, would that be like a trail? It's not a cross country bike, but like kind of like trail bike to race. I think the tall boy is faster. But like we have some spots around here where it's just more fun to ride the 5010. You know, because they're not places where you get fun out of all out speed.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean there. I mean, the 29ers definitely shine where you're being pedally, you know, that at least that's where I feel like it you know, it really shines the most, where it's like, oh wow, I can really like jam through these like pedally spots. And at a higher cadence, you know?
Yeah. But on the flip side, it's not the full picture, you know?
Yeah.
Like Rampage just happened. People are running Mullets, except they're 26 in the back and 27.5 up front.
Just trying to make everything difficult. That's the marketing for 3 years from now, right? It'll be like, no, the Mullet you have is not the good one anymore. 26 is coming back, baby.
I mean, from a trick standpoint, that definitely makes sense, because, you know, inertia is like proportional to diameter or radius squared. Diameter radius, same thing, whatever. So they just put a small wheel on there so that you can spin the bike like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah. So which one of the bikes that you've worked on actually ended up being more difficult than you expected it to be?
More difficult. I gotta think about this for a second. I would say the Ibis, the Ritmo, and the pivot switchblade.
Yeah.
And then potentially the Enduro. Just because those are bikes where there are a lot of clearance things to take into consideration. With the switchblade, really that like tiny little lower links really nested in there. And it took a number of tries to make sure that it didn't contact the frame throughout travel, because you put the first one on and it hits in one spot. So then you tweak it so it doesn't hit there, and then it hits a little bit deeper in travel. So you make another one. Yeah. Ones where it's really tight like that, you get it as close as, like, you design it so you think it'll clear, and then if it doesn't clear, you fix that and do another one. And yeah, so those ones are just, they're harder from a time standpoint.
Do your links tend to like weigh the same as like the manufacturer link, or is it like is it in some cases heavier or lighter, or does that even matter?
So most of the links, it's pretty much the same. There are a couple of links that are definitely heavier. There are some that are also lighter. Just because, so everyone's heard about the V1 Sentinel link. It seems that's like one of our most popular ones by far, and that one is significantly heavier because it's just bigger and it's not carbon. So because of that, a lot of people assume that all of the links are just way heavier. But they're, generally speaking, they're not. They're about the same. And to be honest, people are like, oh, like if you did a blind test, no one would notice the difference between links, in terms of how they perform, which I don't think that's true at all. I do think if you did a blind test in terms of weight, no one would notice the difference.
I 100% agree with you there. I mean, I definitely noticed a difference in my bike. There was not a placebo to it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, and like weight wise, like we're talking about like grams. You threw a water bottle on your bike, or some of them, it's like, oh, it's this much heavier. Okay, well then, like, don't take a Cliff Bar along with you.
Yeah, I always joke around about that. You want to save like $2,000 on your bike, dude? Like, shave your beard, man. It's like the same amount of weight, Yeah, and I was thinking, if anything, like honestly, if it was a little heavier, depending on the bike, I guess, like where the Santa Cruz, like where the link is real low on the bike, like if you're adding weight to the middle and low, I don't really think that's going to hurt any. Like if anything, like I don't know, like when I rode a Zero, they have that big old gearbox in there, like all that weight right in the middle of the bike. It made the thing feel like it was like had a keel on turns. You know what I mean? Like you were just stuck to the ground.
Yeah.
Like, this is rad, you know? So
Yeah. I mean, the Santa Cruz ones, those happen to be the ones where it's pretty much break even.
Yeah.
We're like plus or minus a few grams depending on the Santa Cruz link.
Uh-huh.
But
so at Cascade, you guys do these links and now you have these brakes. Is there other products that you do as well for bikes?
I mean, so right now we're sticking to the links and the brakes. We're going to see how the brakes play out, see if we want to do any more brake stuff. Because I do think, with like the past 5 years, brake rotor size has just exploded and brake power has been a little bit stagnant in comparison. So, I feel like increasing the power for other brakes is something that could be beneficial as well. But going to see how these ones do before we dive into that.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there are always other things, but they might not see the light of day.
Right.
Because like some, like, let's see, for example, like, I like to make like seat post clamps for my bikes just because I can, and it's kind of amusing. I can engrave whatever I want on them.
Yeah.
But we're not going to sell those because, I mean, it'd be a very expensive seat post clamp.
Right.
And all those have to do is clamp your seat.
Yeah, that makes sense there. If you want to re-engineer something on the bike that would like change people's lives, I feel like that stupid clamp that holds your seat to the freaking post is like the worst freaking design every time I take my seat on or off, I just want to punch somebody. Like, I'm like, why is this so hard to like, why can't they just make like a quick release system that I can just pop it open, take it and take it off and put it right back to where I wanted it to be. It doesn't seem like it needs to be so difficult, And especially now, like you have your dropper, right? You have to take your seat off to like put more air in it every once in a while. And you're like, oh God, I don't care. I was telling my buddy on the trail today, like I could put tape on there. I can scratch little lines in it. And every time you take your seat off, it takes like 3 or 4 rides to get it back to like where you're happy with it. You know what I mean? Like I literally ride with an Allen key in my pocket for like the first 2 rides just so I can like try to get it right again. So I don't know. Definitely fix the seat post clamp. You'll make millions. I'm telling you. You heard it here first.
Yeah, it's funny though. Now that you say that, I could see it being kind of nice if you just had like a really, really small, like, ring that just clamped onto the seat post so that you could just slide it down to that exact spot every single time and
right,
be good to go.
Yeah, I just feel like there's like an easier way. And I think there's a couple of companies that have done a different one. I want to say like the Fox Post might have a different like mounting mechanism than the traditional like 2 screws and the little spinny part or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call it. But like, I don't know, man. I just feel like something is like not right there. You know what I mean? It's just aggravating. At least for me it is. And maybe everybody else is like, no, seats are fine. I'm like, I don't know. You can't get your Allen key in there right. Then you're trying to like move it. You're trying not to scratch your freaking dropper. It's just, I don't know.
It's definitely, it gets you the adjustment that you need. And it gets you in a way that's simple, but it happens that all your adjustments are combined into, 2 screws. So you can't change just one at a time.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I completely agree. If you're taking your seat on and off, it's a huge pain.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like everything else seems to be pretty getting dialed, or like better or whatever. And it's like, I mean, like grips, for example, like when Lock On grips came out, that was like, this is amazing. I can't tell you how many grips, like as a kid, trying to slide grips on the bar and like everybody had their secret trick of like, oh, you put dish soap in there, you put this on there. It's like, it was always a pain in the ass. And then those came out. It's like, oh, wow, this is great. and they actually stay there. I feel like that same revolution can happen with the seat, and everybody will be happier with their lives. So what hang on, I saw something up here. Somebody's asking, what bike do you think benefits the most from the Cascade Link?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Right? All the ones that we sell.
So I would say the V1 Transition Sentinel.
Yeah.
If I had to pick one, at least from my point of view.
Is that the bike that comes with the coil?
What's that?
Is that the bike that comes with the coil already?
There have been different renditions of it. It mostly came with a DPX2.
Okay, I'm thinking of a different bike. I'm gonna look it up.
But no, then they did the on-coil version of it, which definitely could use some progression. Yeah, I don't know. That one's kind of hard to say because it a little bit depends on what people are going for. For some people, a different bike might be a bigger difference. The Kona Process Link, that one's a pretty big difference too. I mean, personally, I felt like the Nomad Link was a huge difference because the first time I rode that thing, I was like, whoa, what have I done?
Right. You were super stoked.
Yeah, it was crazy.
What did that feel like to like actually go from like this idea to having this thing in your hand?
I mean, the first time you machine it, you're super paranoid you're going to scrap the part because it takes a while to do the prototype. But then once it's done, it's like, whoa. And it's installed correctly. There's no clearance issues. And yeah, and then, I mean, after the first one, it's like, oh, I've done this before. But yeah, the first time around, it was like, whoa, this really works.
Yeah. How about that math? That math stuff really works out, man. What do you know? Get you to the moon and change your bike geometry.
Yeah, no, it really was crazy. Like there's the first time I took it out for a ride, there's this, local trail that's kind of like, it's a good mix of like high speed with some jumps and then like some little bits of tech here and there. And there's one particular spot where you go off this drop after like there's a steep roll into a drop, and then you land on some chunky rocks. And like, usually it was just kind of getting bobbled around trying to brake for the catch berm. And the first time I rode that Link down that trail, or the first time I rode it at all, because that was the first time, it was like, oh my God, it is so composed going into this catch berm. I can slow down like way more than I need to.
Yeah. It was definitely interesting today, like riding and keeping that in mind that that change was there. Do you think it does it do anything as far as like affect the way that a bike would climb?
I mean, yeah, yes and no. Personally, I don't really feel a difference climbing with any of the links. One thing people definitely need to watch out for, though, is the amount of sag you're running. That is pretty heavily correlated to how it pedals. You want it to sit in a certain anti-squat range, which with most bikes is right around 30% sag. But when you change to the leverage curve, you're changing how much sag at the wheel 30% at the shot gets you. And you're changing the amount of pressure, the spring rate that you need to. So whenever we hear people say, oh, this bike pedals super sluggish now, the first thing we always say is, double check your sag. And if, let's say you were at 30 before and you're at 30 now, you might actually want to go a little bit less just to get the sag at the wheel to be the same. Because that's really what matters for the anti-squat curve is the sag at the wheel. I didn't
really notice anything on the climbing end of it, at least with mine. But I sometimes it takes me a while. You know what I mean? Like I'm one of those people that I won't notice it as much when you give me something new as when you take it away. Like if I ride this bike like this for a month and then I put the old Link on, then I'll notice it like way more. You know what I mean? Like that just tends to be me. Like I'll catch some things right out the gate, but like I don't know. It just seems to be the way it really works for me. It's like once you're like really comfortable, like you really know how it feels. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Climbing is one that I always notice right off the bat. If there's any difference with climbing, because once I've ridden, my enduro is heavy,
Mm-hmm.
but I've ridden that enough now where I think it pedals fantastic. So I'm just accustomed to it weighs 37 pounds.
Yeah, it's a pretty chunky bike.
Yeah, so I'm accustomed to that now, and it pedals great. And then if I hop on something that actually pedals great, and weighs 30 pounds, it's like, whoa, this is a cross country race bike.
Right. Yeah, I went through this process in the last year or two now. I don't even know what it's been. It's probably been 2 years at this point, where I like wanted to stop wearing a bag ever. And so now I have all this shit strapped to my bike. And it's like people pick my bike up and they're like, oh my God, it's so freaking heavy. And it's like, well, yeah, dude, I got a pump on there that has a tool in it. I got a tube and you know what I mean? Like all this other crap strapped on there. And then I'm putting 2 water bottles on it, or something like that. And it's like, of course it's heavy, but I don't know. It's just like, I really enjoyed not wearing a bag at all.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. I used to think that there was no way I would never carry a CamelBak, because I was one of those guys that like carried everything. You know what I mean? It'd be like, oh yeah, you want a zip tie? I got 3 sizes. You know what I mean? It's like carrying so much stuff around all the time just in case, and now it's like I have that EDC pump that has the tool in it, and I've been surprised, like honestly, for the last year that I've been using that and I've been out on the trail, it really hasn't, like, no situation has come up that I've been like, oh crap, this doesn't have what I need. You know what I mean? And if it has been that situation, it's like, it's just been like a fluke kind of thing where it's like, okay, well, there's nothing that's going to fix this problem. Like I just broke 10 spokes. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's it, So I don't know. I have a hip pack that I use sometimes just when I want to carry more water, but I've really enjoyed just riding without it. It just feels better. But now my bike's heavy as hell.
Yeah, but it's not weight on the wheels, so that's
right.
So like what really made or has made me realize this more so than anything else is in the winter I do a lot of backcountry skiing, and in that world, the less weight you can have on your feet, the easier by far. Like if you have that weight added to your backpack, it's not a big deal because it's not on your feet anymore. It's the same with bikes and wheels. It's just instead of lifting that weight every time on your foot, you're spinning however heavy your wheel is.
That makes sense.
Which is one of the reasons why I run 11 speed on everything and like nice cassettes because they don't weigh a lot.
They don't what a lot?
They don't weigh very much, so you keep your wheel weight down.
That makes sense.
You'll see bikes come spec'd with like a GX 12 speed cassette weighs, it's either like 0.3 or 0.25 pounds more than the cassette I have on my wheel.
Yeah, it's a fair amount of weight.
Yeah.
I know that's the one thing that when you're looking at weight of components on your bike, like the cassette is like definitely one where you're like, oh, that is way heavier than the cheap or than the expensive version. Like if you look at like an XX1 cassette compared to like an NX cassette, like how much it weighs, it's dramatic.
It's way different, but when you actually like the weight or the cost per gram or whatever, how expensive is that weight savings? Because you can get so much out of a cassette, I feel like it's actually a pretty good thing to spend money on getting light.
Yeah.
Plus,
that one makes sense.
It's sprung weight and it's rotating.
Yeah. It's a tough pill to swallow, though. Whenever you're like, because I think like those XX1s or whatever, like they're like $600 or something like that for a cassette, right? I don't even know. They're pretty expensive. Let's
They're
see.
pretty
If
expensive.
we only had this tool called the internet, we could look up things. Right?
Yeah, I honestly forget what they are at retail though.
Yeah. It looks like, what's this one here? That's not an XX1. Yeah, this is like $450 for an XX1. Yeah. And I think like it's probably like $300 or something like that for the Eagle. Let's look and see how much an Eagle cassette is. What do you know? Yeah, a GX Eagle is like $220. So it's like twice the price. Yeah, these things happen. I don't know. I always go with the idea that if I buy something that's cheaper and weighs more, I'm just going to get stronger, right? Like you only notice it for like that first part, like you buy a new set of like lighter wheels, you're like first couple rides are like, wow, this is great. And then after you're used to it, you don't notice it anymore,
I think for the like downhill laps and especially for jumps, that's where it that's where I like it at least.
Yeah.
It's not so much about anything else other than it feels better going over really choppy stuff. It feels better jumping.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That totally makes sense. Yeah, I was thinking I've been running Cushcore for quite some time because I like that sidewall stiffness, and I think it's really just because I'm a big guy. You know what I mean? So the tires react differently for me than somebody that weighs like 160, 170 pounds. And but I was thinking about that recently about taking them out and riding it again for a while without them and seeing how I feel. And I think I'm going to do that. I have a set of like kind of plus wheels that I'm using right now on my Bronson. And then I have another set of wheels that are Envies, and I broke a rim recently. And so it's been out getting rebuilt. And I think when it comes back, I'm just going to give it a shot with the way it is and see how it goes. I don't know. I usually was that.
Oh, I run Cushcore on most of my bikes.
Yeah.
And it's like the slower kind of like loamy natural trails. Those are the ones where I've noticed it's not not that apparent. Versus like if you go rip bike park laps, having that little bit of damping and some protection and sidewall support is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I noticed it. That was one of those products similar to yours, like the first ride with the Cushcore, and like immediately in my corners, I was like, oh wow, I can totally tell a difference. Like totally tell a difference. And but I tried their XC version. I don't know if you've tried that. It to me is like it doesn't do those things.
It's definitely not nearly as much.
Yeah, I liked the idea of it at first. I was like, oh, if I can get that sidewall stiffness still and it doesn't weigh as much, like that'd be rad, and but it really, to me, I feel like that it just feels like, oh, okay, it's like a rim protector. It's not really like doing all the stuff that it did that the original one does,
I run the XC one up front pretty much just for rim protector, actually.
That makes sense because you probably don't feel it in the front tire as much anyway.
Yeah, and that's not the one that you're trying to tear off the wheel in corners.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So is back to the Cascade links. What is something that you kind of had to learn the hard way along the way of building these links, and like a big challenge that you came up to that you kind of weren't expecting or something like that? If you look back on, you wish you could tell yourself how to get out of it quickly.
I honestly, I don't know. I mean, I think we've taken it all in stride pretty well, just because it's something that we've kind of done before, so we've learned those lessons in the past.
Yeah.
I would say the only one that keeps popping up is just turnaround times on anodized parts for us right now has just been a pain.
So you guys are sending your stuff out to get to an anodizer to get done. You don't do it now.
Yeah, we don't have our own ano line.
Yeah,
because that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, but I mean, that's something that like we know that that's problematic. It's not really a surprise, except when we need something back in stock because it's gone, and then we end up waiting a month for it to show up back from ano, and then people ask, oh, when's it going to be back in stock? And so, well, usually it's back in stock in 2 weeks, but 2 weeks happened 2 weeks ago, and we don't have the parts back yet. So
that's a drag. I know my buddy, he runs the Project 321, the hub company, and he has to, always send that stuff out, and you're kind of at somebody else's mercy,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the way that things are too, I'm sure with like COVID just screwing everything up, it's like it trickles down into all these other places,
Yeah. Definitely.
What would you like to see like Cascade Components be? Like you think that, hey, you got a good niche with adjusting the linkages and not just stick with that? Or would you like to, like, in your mind, have somebody like Santa Cruz be like, you know what, we want you to make all our links?
Boy, I mean, I think we're doing pretty good as it is now. There are a whole range of, projects that would be cool to take on. And I mean, we're, like I said before, there's a portion of the company that does like mechanical engineering design work. So like if anyone wanted to have us do kinematics work for them, I mean, we'd be more than happy to work something out. I think it would be really cool to do links for like a World Cup downhill team that doesn't have like that factory support, where they can, just hit up whoever sponsors their team and go, hey, I want, these custom links. I think that'd be a really fun project.
Yeah. So you could, like, in that case, you would be like dialing it in for the specific rider, like what they want, rather than kind of trying to be a little bit more generic for like everybody or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, like we definitely, like, we aim the links towards, a specific group of riders, but being able to get even more specific than that.
Yeah. Like, is there something that you would do different for somebody like me that's like a heavy rider compared to somebody that's not? Like, would there be some kind of design change that would be beneficial?
So, well, one that would be really cool to be able to do for heavy riders, which wouldn't necessarily work with every single bike, is if you could tweak the linkages so that you got the same amount of travel and progression, but had a longer shock installed. That would make a world of difference.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying then. Yeah.
Like if you had, like, let's say your 170 millimeter enduro bike that comes with a 65 millimeter stroke shock, and then there was a version of it for heavier riders where it was a 75 millimeter stroke shock. That would be way better for a heavier rider.
Interesting. There you go. Now you got something to work on next week, right?
Hard thing is you need a frame where there's a shock extender and enough room to put a massive shock on there.
Yeah. Everything is designed pretty tight on those things nowadays compared to how it used to be.
Yeah, and the newer bikes keep getting tighter and tighter, it seems.
Yeah, definitely is. So it's interesting. It's definitely it's changing all the time, and then you're looking at stuff like, isn't it Scott that just brought out, they have like they're like shocks like inside the frame now.
Yeah,
which is kind of crazy. It looks really clean though. Have you ridden one of those? I haven't ridden one like that.
No, I haven't ridden one. I haven't even seen one in person.
Yeah, I saw at Sea Otter. I saw one. I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy to see. So let's see here. Somebody says, is there a force feedback to the shock variable? I don't even know what that means. Does that make sense to you?
Feedback to the shock. I mean, that's like leverage curve is a multiplier for force, that you multiply your vertical force at the wheel by the leverage ratio, and that gives you the force at the shock. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what he was asking there. Anyways, yeah. So at this point, you have what, like pretty much like the big brands on your site, right? It's like let's see here. You have like Santa Cruz. Who else are you making links for?
So we got Santa Cruz, Transition, Yeti, Evil, Kona, Specialized, Ibis, Pivot. Am I missing anything? Forbidden.
Yeah, so a bunch of them.
Morco.
And there's different bikes then as well for those. Like, it's not just one line either, too. So it's like, okay, well, here's a bunch of Santa Cruz ones. Like you have High Tower, V2, V1, Mega Tower, Nomad, Bronson, V3. What's the Bronson V3 link do?
I mean, pretty much the same thing as the other Santa Cruz links, more progressive, and then travel goes up a little bit. It doesn't make it into a V4 Bronson, though.
Yeah.
That would require a longer shock.
Yeah. I haven't ridden the new one yet. I'm kind of curious to see how it feels. One of my buddies was saying that it changes the bottom bracket height. Does it make it lower on all the bikes, or just so happens to be that way with the Bronson, or
varies bike to bike? The Bronson's one of the ones where it happens to be lower. The Yetis are all lower. A lot of the Santa Cruz links are not lower at all. Pretty much, we actually try and keep the ride height the same as stock, or the same as the stock setting that we prefer. So, like the Mega Tower, for example, it's the same as the stock low position.
Yeah, I think because you, and I guess we should mention that for people so they know that, like, when you get the link, you don't have the ability to use your flip chips anymore. So it's like that piece is gone. So is there a reason that you didn't want to like machine that in there, or?
Well, so like on the 5010 link, we have a flip chip, but it's for travel. Same geometry, just changes the amount of travel. The reason we haven't done flip chips on the other Santa Cruz links is because, honestly, what I've found with them is the geometry change is so small where once you're used to it, you don't notice it at all. If we're talking about lowering or raising your bottom bracket 3 millimeters, you could run different tires or change your tire pressure by a hair and get that same, height difference. So realistically, to me, 3 millimeters bottom bracket height, it's not going to make or break a bike, or really even be all that much different. And then once you're used to it, you just don't even notice at all. Like the Nomad, I went back and forth between high or low for a bit, and I would only notice it the first, not even the first lap where I changed it, the first part of the first lap. I would notice the difference. And then after that, it was just like, same bike.
Yeah. I hear you there. That's kind of funny. Yeah. It's hard for me to tell on those things, sometimes it kind of jumps out to you a little bit, but others I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it's just in my head or not. You know what I mean? So, but what are you excited about working on?
I mean, I really like the brakes. I guess that's kind of wrapped up though, because those are in production now. But yeah, those have been actually my favorite project so far. honestly though, I always like diving into a new link, just getting to go test stuff and see how much you can actually change it is always a fun experiment. Even though we've done all these, different bikes, there's always variation. You might realize that, a certain layout, you actually want more progression than you thought, or maybe not as much progression. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the major selling point that is for the link itself?
I mean, they're a tuning tool, right? And it's kind of geared towards, well, so there are people that just they maybe the closest thing to what they want is a tall boy, but a tall boy isn't exactly what they want. You might be able to use a link to get it. Let's say you're riding a bike aggressively enough where you're kind of stretching its capabilities. It can help reel that back in so that you're like the bike can do more than what you're putting it through again. There's that aspect too. Or for riding around here, like in the Pacific Northwest, it's great balancing how the bike rides over roots versus how it rides with really big impacts, because we have a lot of trails where you've got some big old jumps sprinkled into a bunch of roots, and just being able to have it set up so that it actually feels good on both is pretty sweet, instead of that kind of balancing act where you're like, I'm going to tweak this and then it's not going to feel as good on the jumps or maybe on the roots. It gets you out of the pick your poison type of thing sometimes.
Yeah, somebody said something interesting to me about it too. They were like, you could go out and buy a new shock, and if maybe it didn't do what you wanted it to do, you've spent like a lot of money on that, and maybe not, like there's nothing, like if you tried to sell that shock or something like that, you're not going to be able to sell it for like pretty close to the same of what you paid for,
Yeah.
Where like they were like with that link, they were like, you could try it, and if you really didn't like it, you could sell that link for pretty much the same price you bought it for. Like it's because it's not like it's going to be like it's just a piece of metal with bearings in it. You know what I mean? It's not like it's like, oh well, I don't know what this guy's done to that shock. You know what I mean? He could say it doesn't have 1,000 miles on it, but it could. You know what I mean? Like so. I don't know. What do you guys do as far as like the bearings go and stuff like that? If somebody like, are they just like some traditional size bearing that you can just order from you guys if people like wear them out, or do you guys have some kind of policy with that where they can get them replaced? Or
so generally speaking, we use the same bearings as what the bike comes with, so that if they buy that bearing kit, they like for the bike, they have everything already there.
Okay.
Just
so it's not anything different in that manner then.
Yeah, there are some bikes where we've decided that some of the bearings are too small, and we actually have upsized some of them. Like the bearing that the shock attaches to is unreasonably tiny on the stock link. So we made that bigger so that you're not just going through them left and right. As far as selling the bearings go, we're not actually really, we're not allowed to sell them because we're a manufacturer and not a distributor or something like that. I don't know all the ins and outs of like, how Enduro structures their sales. So that's just like the way we're set up right now. We technically can't sell bearing kits.
Got it.
I would say like whenever someone, if we get an email and someone's like, I've only ridden this bike for like, a week or whatever, some short amount of time, and my bearing's blown up, then that's like, okay, that's a defective bearing. We'll just send you another. Obviously, like if you've ridden your bike for like a full season and abused it, that's a whole different scenario.
Yeah. You can't really expect that, you know. Have you do you guys do some kind of testing to the product to see to put it to a failure point and see how that is, or
It pretty much consists of me casing big jumps.
so you're like, nope, this one's good.
Yeah, no, I try to thoroughly abuse them. We don't test until a frame fails, because frames are expensive and that would kind of be a waste of a frame.
Yeah.
So the real practical test is, does your wheel break before it? Because if you blow up your wheel, then you can't actually exert any more force on the bike. And yeah, that's what happens when you case a big jump. So
yeah, definitely. That's no bueno. That's an expensive day then, right? So what are you looking forward to then, since you wrapped up the brake project? You got something else that's obviously maybe you can't talk about or something, or are you guys just
no, we're
plugging away?
We're launching the Spire Link. Well, Spire and Patrol. The new one's Share a Link. Quite soon, actually. Really any day now. Just got to get a few more ducks in a row.
Well, that's fun. Do you are you guys planning on going to a bunch of different events, or was Sea Otter kind of just your one to kind of get a feel, put the feels out, or?
Yeah, I mean, we'd never gone to one before, so Sea Otter definitely was a bit of a just getting a feel for it. We think it was good, so hopefully.
Did you guys sell a bunch there, or?
I mean, maybe. We've never done one before, so we sold what I thought was a decent number of links, and I mean, maybe it was actually quiet. I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, if you felt like it was good, then it was good, right?
Yeah, well, I'm getting to, I think, more so than selling things, just getting to talk to people, and people getting to put a face to the company and whatnot, and just we're not just some random website that drop ships you things from a sketchy warehouse.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand there. I know when I walked in, they were saying one of the main guys from Ibis was in there a little bit earlier in the day.
Oh, yeah, apparently.
Yeah, he came in and looked at one of the links and was like, "This is for an Ibis," and they were like, "Yeah," and then he's like, oh, "Okay," and then he left or something like that.
Yeah, David was telling me about that. I was like,
"Yeah, funny." That's interesting. It's definitely interesting. What gives you what have you enjoyed most about the process of starting this business?
Honestly, I mean, I like just seeing something that I have thought is beneficial, being able to help out other people too. I'm not going to tell anyone they're right or wrong about their bike setup. As long as it's working for you, then that's great. And if we can play a role in getting people's bikes to work great for them, then all the better.
You guys, somebody's asking, you guys going to make a Ripley AF link?
Oh yeah, we get a lot of questions about that one. We don't know right now. We have a very long short list.
A very long short list. There's lots of bikes.
Yeah, there are a lot of bikes, and a lot of it boils down to what drops out easily. We might have something lined up, and then it turns out we get another bike in the next day that we didn't expect we were going to get in so soon, and then that one turns into the next one.
Yeah, I hear you. And then I mean, as bikes are designed, then when there's a new build out, then you're looking at that, and trying to kind of figure out if that kind of fits into your space too, right? Is there some that you look at and you're like, no, the curves are already pretty decent, there's not room for change?
Oh, yeah, there are a few like that. Not, I wouldn't say a whole lot. I mean, the flip side is like if the bike brand were to go and make, all of their bikes exactly like, the links that we make, then we might actually make a less progressive link for people that want a less progressive link. Because again, it's just a tuning tool. If it, if some people can benefit from it moving one way or another, then, we'll do it.
Do you think there would be a market there for somebody that would want it less progressive than the way that it comes? What would be the gain there?
I mean, so the downfall to like super progressive is it's harder to use full travel. So if you have, some setup where given your terrain or riding style or whatever, you're just not using full travel, making it less progressive would make it so that you could use full travel again. I mean, all of our links are, to date are aimed at people who are using full travel too easily. But, if someone were to come out with a bike where, all these people are like, oh, this is ridiculous. Like I've got a 170 millimeter bike and I only ever use 150. Then, that would be a good spot to go, okay, we're going to just make this a little bit less progressive so that people can actually use their full travel. I don't know if things are ever going to hit that point, but
yeah. Well, being a fat guy, I don't have that problem. So all the travel, all the time.
I think the bikes that we do steer clear of though are ones where you would have to remake the whole rear triangle pretty much to do the changes that we want. Those are bikes where the rear shock generally mounts directly to the rear triangle. Like a lot of YT bikes are like that.
Yeah, it just doesn't work for them.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to make so many parts or such big parts, or it would just be way too expensive.
Doesn't make any sense that way. Have you ever thought about engineering your own bike?
I mean, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it would be a really fun project. On the other hand, there's so many bikes out there where I've found, being able to tweak linkage a little bit and all the various components on the bike, I can pretty much get what I want without having to, make a whole bike from scratch. So while it would be a fun project, it's not really a project that I feel the need to do per se. It's very expensive also.
Yeah. I feel like it would be fun to do, but I'm not equipped to do something like that. But I think if I was, I would probably try it just to like see if I could come up with something that I thought would be better. Do you ever look at like suspension design and think, like you could be the next guy that comes up with something else that's like, the not DW, or like the.
Hey, that's a hard one. I mean, because there are only so many ways you can lay out linkages, right?
Right.
At a certain point, I mean, even like DW links and Horst link suspension, I mean, theoretically, they're actually the same thing. It's just that like your chainstay on a Horst link bike is the exact same linkage as the DW, like the lower short DW link. It's just the DW one is specifically very, very short. So like that's one where it's like technically it's kind of the same thing. So I guess like from that standpoint, like there might be, down the road some really awesome way to lay out an existing, sort of like general platform that hasn't been done before. Or, I mean, like, we're seeing more and more 6-bar layouts now, which I can see two sides of things with those. On one side, you're opening up more freedom for like separating variables. On the other hand, it's adding complexity, and at some point, complexity isn't necessarily something you want. Not saying we should all be rolling around on single pivots. But there is some middle ground, right? You don't want to have like a 10 link bike with pivots all over. And
Yeah, I hear you there. I feel like the simplistic way is usually better. Like, I don't know, just like even in nature, like it seems like things are simple. Like the simple way is the way that actually is like the most efficient. And when things are overly complicated, it just doesn't work well. You know what I mean?
Or like from a service standpoint too, like, I mean, you just throw a bunch of bearings in there and all of a sudden your bearing kit costs, $70 instead of $40.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Right. And then you have all these other points for failure,
Yeah.
So when you went to school originally you started going to school for engineering, were you like thinking that someday you'd be working on bikes, or like you were just thinking?
No.
Not at all, huh?
No, actually, yeah. The thing I studied maybe the most in school was renewable energy, funny enough. And then, yeah, now I'm working on bike parts.
Yeah. So just from an idea that you had walking out of the woods one day, huh?
I guess more or less, yeah.
Yeah. Where did you like to see it go? So
What was that?
Where would you like to see it go?
Where would I like to see it go? I mean, I want to keep offering more and more links, obviously. I've got some ideas for a brake lever to go along with our caliper that hopefully it'll make sense to explore at some point.
So then it would basically be your own line of brakes at that point then.
Yeah. Which that would be kind of nice, just to have one thing that is truly, our own like standalone thing.
Yeah, I think that brakes are really important, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, because the only way that you know that you have shitty brakes is to buy better ones. You know what I mean? Like most people are like, they're like, no, my brakes are fine. You're like, yeah, well, try these, and then they're like, oh my god, my brakes suck. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I just, to me, it's like that's one of those things that I don't want to. There's other components that I would cheap out on over brakes. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah. Oh, for sure. There are a handful of. So for me, it is brakes, wheels, and suspension are those are the key things. Because obviously brakes stop you, and then don't need my bike to blow up on me. So
right. Yeah, it's definitely. I think it's interesting seeing that the companies that are doing like the bigger rotors too, and then I think that's really like that heat dissipation thing, is what that comes down to. But somebody was saying that even with the thicker rotor though, then it still like retains heat a little better though, or a little more than.
Yeah. So this is all just theoretical, because we haven't gotten a chance to get any of the new thick rotors in. In theory, when you just make something bigger like that, you increase the amount of heat that it can actually store, but you don't really change how fast it can dissipate heat. So it takes it longer to overheat, but then once it overheats, it's not like it necessarily cools off any faster.
Right. Maybe that's
and then another bit with bigger rotors is you can keep making rotors bigger and bigger, and the rotor itself will deal with heat better. But there's, that component of like that bit of heat that goes into the caliper instead of into the rotor. And if you don't change your caliper, then it's always going to deal with that heat the exact same way. And if you're, generating more braking power with a bigger rotor, then you're putting more heat into the exact same caliper.
So you're thinking that the caliper actually needs a way to cool faster.
Or be able to, because there's kind of like a cycle to it. You brake, then you let off the brakes. And if you can get it so that over the course of that cycle, it doesn't accumulate heat, then everything would be good. It doesn't need to be able to necessarily dissipate heat at the same rate it's generated.
Mm-hmm.
while braking. It just needs to be able to do it over the course of that whole cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely yeah, it's definitely interesting. That's for sure. Yeah, I saw like I was over at like the Galfer tent, and they had some huge rotors, man. Like,
Yeah,
they were like, "Oh yeah, well, we've been in the motorcycle industry for a long time, so we're making these that are this big." And I was like, "Holy cow!" Like, I never even like I would think at a certain point, like the weight of those would be like something that you didn't want to deal with, you know?
yeah, they do get heavier. That's for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
they also get more flexible when they get bigger too. Um, so a little
Yes.
bend in your rotor makes it actually, deflect a larger amount, and then all of a sudden your rotor's not, half a millimeter out of true. It's 2 millimeters, or that's a little extreme.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 I get what you're saying there. It's definitely yeah. Yeah. Who knows? You know what I mean? I don't know. Is there a sweet spot that we haven't tapped into yet? I mean, for me, I run 203s on my bikes because I'm heavy. So it makes sense to me, but I don't know why anybody would want to run anything smaller than that personally. like it's just like I want to stop. Like I want my brakes to work all the time. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I mean, again, like you were saying before, the modulation is, your finger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just squeeze it as hard as you need to squeeze it, and it doesn't matter if you've got 200 millimeter rotors on your trail bike.
Yeah. 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 I guess if I lived somewhere that was more like flat, maybe I wouldn't care as much, you know? But like where we live, I live in Northern California. I mean, like where you live is probably very similar. Like you do a big climb and you do a long descent, you know?
Yeah.
So you're definitely like working those brakes over those several miles of descending, where like somebody that lives somewhere more like, let's just say like Sedona, for example, it's like up, down, up, down, up, down. You know what I mean? So it's like you're not just riding the brake at 35 miles an hour. You know what I mean? Like just heating the hell of it, like up, or something like that, like you would do in Downeyville, or 20 miles an hour, even at that. It's like, I mean, I've been on rides before you finish and you can hear your freaking rotor like tinging. You know what I mean? Like that's freaking hot.
Yeah.
So is there like was it just like you just wanted more power? That's what made you want to do that brake? Like that was it? You just wanted to not have did you feel like your brakes were like fading over a certain amount of time, or you just wanted to be able to pull less hard and have more braking power?
A bit of all of that, yeah. There are a couple of trails in particular around here where at the bottom it felt like you'd have to squeeze it way too hard to get the braking force that you needed. And then some of it was trying to minimize fatigue. And I mean, obviously those two things play into each other. If you have to squeeze your brakes harder than, you maybe should, then your hands will fatigue quicker. So yeah, that the main thing really was the fatigue. And yeah, it's just a combination of both of those things.
Yeah, there's definitely some trails around here that I've been riding that like earlier last year, I think I started having like all these like hand like pain, and I didn't know what it was. And I thought like I like bought a different set of bars because everybody's like, oh, these 1-up bars, they have this like compliance, they're so much better. And I tried some different grips and like I couldn't get it to go away. And then I realized it was like this trail system that I was just riding all the time, that I was just like, it's super steep, and then just like squeezing the living shit out of my brakes for like, and riding it all the time. And it was like, I had not ridden there for a while because that area gets like a lot of poison oak, and it went away. And I was like, oh my God, that's what it was. It was just like riding over there all the time. And me just freaking death gripping my brakes trying to come down this hill, So maybe I need more powerful brakes, or just need to do more dieting or something like that, right? So, well, hey, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat with me. It was definitely fun. Is there anything about the product that you want like people to know that maybe we didn't cover?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like we talked about it all pretty well.
Right.
The one thing that's interesting about the brakes that we kind of noticed and didn't entirely expect is, so it almost like there are instances where it feels like you have more traction, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And more we thought about it, kind of realized that it's like, oh, you actually like, since you don't have to squeeze the levers as hard, it frees up your hands to do other things better. So it's almost like it's easier to transfer weight and stuff like that a little more accurately, which that was a bit of a surprise, actually.
That is interesting.
As far as this go.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I'm down for better brakes no matter what. So I'll definitely keep an eye on what you guys are doing over there. I really appreciate the time that you took to sit down and chat with me. And honestly, like I said earlier in the show, like was really, really impressed with the change that I felt in the bike. I was skeptical of how much I would actually tell, like I'm one of those guys that doesn't know how to like do his suspension very well. You know what I mean? Like some guys are like, oh yeah, man, just like do a click here and a tap over there. And now it's like dialed. And I'm like, dude, I picked it up and wherever it was is where it is for the rest of my life until like one of my buddies is like, oh, this is all fucked up. And then he changes it. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, so I didn't really know if I was going to notice it. And it was like very apparent. So I think that it's, well worth the money. And I appreciate you making a product like that, man.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. We're glad you enjoy it.
Yeah. So I always ask people at the end of my shows, you watch YouTube?
Some YouTube.
Yeah. I always ask people what channels they watched or like what's one of their favorite channels and it doesn't matter if it has to do with bikes or not. It's just an interesting question to me. And it's fun to go like kind of check some other stuff out.
I guess I'm not the best for that question then, because the YouTube I watch is mainly just people sending me random videos.
Yeah. So just that's the random one. So you don't have any channels that you follow particularly?
No.
I hear you there. Well, no worries, man. It's all good. Like I said, though, once again, like definitely appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat. And it was fun, dude. Definitely a good time.
Yeah. I mean, hey, thanks for having us on here.
Yeah, for sure. So all you guys that hung out here until the end, I really appreciate you as well. Give me the thumbs up on the video if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're checking this out on a podcast, go ahead and leave a review. Like I said, if it's not a 5-star review, it's probably not worth your time, so don't even bother. But if you want to write a 5-star review, that would be sweet. I like going on there and taking a look at them. They're pretty fun to read, and it's always entertaining to see. It's been really fun doing this podcast now. This is the 100th episode, and it's really been surprising me how many people are coming up to me and actually knowing me from the podcast instead of knowing me from my other channel, which is considerably bigger than the podcast channel. So I appreciate all you guys out there. Keep telling your friends, man. If you have friends that listen to podcasts and they are looking for something new and they like bikes, then go ahead and shoot them a link over to one of these episodes and get them into the B1KER Bar group, right? So I appreciate everybody out there. If you guys want to help support me, swing by my Patreon. That'd be rad. $1 a month, and you can get some coupon codes for some of the companies that I work with. And other than that, if you want to pay a little bit more, you can get some extra content or a sticker pack, or I have like some swag on there as well, or whatever you want to call it, some merch, some cool stuff like that. If you just want to get the merch without going to Patreon, you can swing by my website, biker.com, B1KER.com. Get yourself a shirt like this one I'm wearing right now. Those of you guys that are on the podcast, it says no fucks given on it. So I get compliments from this shirt more than you would expect. Like old ladies at the grocery store, like, that shirt's really funny. I don't know. I'm like, it really surprises me. This is the one that people like the most. So go ahead and swing by there and grab one of your own. If you don't want to do any of that stuff, I totally understand. But I would do want you guys just to remember one thing. It only takes a bike to be a biker. So get out and be one.